Good morning again. You notice I hadn't changed my uniform because we're filming 2 this morning, JP and I are, because I know I'm going to be gone next week and there's a chance I might be going the following week. So just want to make sure we had some and ready to go. So we're going to do the second part and complete that 4S overhead site. We had the overhead CTs. So we will complete that, part 2 of that, where we'll go ahead and test the meter and the CTs and show you the results. There's some interesting stuff that happens here as far as loads and accuracy and that we'll be able to talk about. And then we'll figure out what we're going to do for February 15th. But we'll come up with something on that. We can do a Valentine's Day thing, huh? Ooh. Ooh. Yeah. Who loves Powermetrix?
I do.
I do. That was good. I do. Okay. So then the 15th we'll figure something out. I never know. If I throw these little ideas out to JP, next thing I know, we let it spin and then he'll bounce it off me. And next thing you know, that's where we end up with game show hosts. So anyway, all right. So here we go. So we will, like I said, we'll do the 4S. The second part of it will be today. That's what we're filming right now. And then the 15th, we'll come up with something. We'll figure it out. Send in something to us, okay? Send in something that you want to see. JP will send out a list of the ones that we have left, and you just send in. We'll go by the votes. So we will do a quick recap to get to where we are here now and at this site. Then we're going to test the meter. We're going to test the CTs. We're going to show a couple of cool examples of positioning and some different things with that hot stick and that high volt probe. Okay, it comes out really well. So that's what we'll do. First of all, let me read a little something here. So in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." The literal translation of that is make your paths level. And I always liked that because I thought to myself, I'm not asking for an easy ride downhill, Lord. And hopefully I don't have to have too much of an uphill ride. Just level's fine with me, but what we got to make sure of is we don't ask the Lord to be fair with us. 'Cause that wouldn't work out well for any of us because we're just humans and we're people and we're sinners. So that wouldn't work out that well. But that's that amazing part of grace and what Jesus did on that cross for us. So, yeah, I run into it all the time, man, with all this stuff that's being slung at me. And that's why I can't even watch the news anymore. With all this stuff that's slung at you, you want to try and use this and try and think things out. But if you believe any of that junk out there, there's no telling which way you'll go. So I'm more about this and that way, and I think the rest of the stuff will kind of work out. So let's say a prayer, and then we'll get rolling. Lord, thank you so much for our time this morning. Thank you for JP and Chris and folks that helped get this thing going. And Lord, I just lift up all the folks in our industry that are out there, and they're working hard, and everything's changing on them. They're having to hit things on the fly, moving targets. And the supply chain issues that people are dealing with right now, it's something else, Lord. So there's a lot of things that we want to lean on our own understanding and figure things out on our own. But I think if we bring you into the mix, it usually works out a little bit better for us. So hopefully people are, if nothing else, in the midst of this craziness, hopefully they are praying more and talking to you more. Hopefully they are turning to you more with answers. And they're also, hopefully it's increasing the fellowship between Christian brothers and sisters out there. And we may not be able to meet in big groups like we'd like, but we definitely can talk all the time and meet in small groups. So I find that's what's going on in my church. So we're just, everybody's just fellowshipping where they can, and we're just doing what we can, Lord. So Father, just be there with us. Come alongside of us. We know you'll never let us out of the grip of your hand, Lord. We are literally written right in your hand. So you've got us, you love us. And it's amazing that you do. And because what you did with your son for us so that I can even pray right now is just amazing. So all of these things I say, according to the will of the one who paid it all, my brother, Jesus Christ. Amen. Cool. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started on this. This is where we had, it was a 4S. It's got overhead CTs. And we got out there. Can had junk in it. It wasn't as bad as we had seen. We used an adapter, right? So when we used the adapter, remember we had taken pulled the meter out. And when you get that meter out of there, do some more inspecting. Don't just hurry up and slap it in there and not look. Go ahead and take the time while the meter's out of there it's a good time to do some inspecting. So look back there, check your wires, your connections, stuff sitting back behind there like mud dauber nests or whatever it is, right? So, so you get to do some more inspecting. And then when you put it in, you go ahead and put the adapter in so you can shove it in and get it all the way in there and make sure it's straight in there and there's no gap top or bottom, right? And then you put the meter in. And then from there, that allows us to put our duckbills in. And remember, there's a little cantilever action on that. So you can either hold out, pull dead against you at the bottom like you see Jonathan do, or I push in on the meter and then I just shove the duckbills in. But just keep that in mind. So we put the meter adapter in there. So we have a test switch now at that 4S. So we put our duckbills in. So we're ready to roll on the test. We're doing overhead. So we know we're going to use the hot stick with we're going to use the extendo with our high volt probe. So we're going to be going up there and we should have, it's a 4S. We've got A and B. We've got 2 currents up there, right? So we're looking for, we're going to test the A phase CT and the B phase CT. Okay, and that's where we are right now. So.
One here, I will put some time on this one.
So notice when he put the 30 seconds or 3 revs, it's whichever it sees first. If you put both time and number of revs or pulses in there, whichever it completes first, it will stop the test. So if you have a very light load on there and it completes, let's say 2 instead of 3, but the 30 seconds times out, it will stop the test and you'll get 2 pulses or revs. Whereas if you just had if you left that as 0, it's going to go through 3 revs or 3 pulses. So if you leave either one 0, it's going to complete them. If you put both in, it's whichever it sees first, okay? So looking at the color diagram, it's showing us it's not only showing, it shows you your primary up here at the top, and it'll always it'll show this to you twice. Once when you test the meter and once when you test the CTs. It's showing you how to make your connections for your primaries up there, and it's showing 1 on each. There's no double wrapping or connection between the different phases. It's 1 individual on A and B here, and it tells you down that left-hand side where you're supposed to make your connections. It'll have a green dot where you're supposed to make your connection, okay? So for instance, if you had a 5S open delta, it would just have a green dot on A and C phases and would show nothing on B, right? So this will show you where to make your connections. It's not interactive. If he disconnected something right now, the green dot wouldn't go away. It's just showing you for the service type you've chosen where to make your connections, okay? So it's going to show it now, and then when he gets ready to test CTs, it'll show it again. This is for the meter test.
Vector still look good, still got plenty of load.
That's right, and as part of the integrated site test, it always shows you the vectors first. So right now you can see if we're getting ready to test the CTs, you know, we've got that number we look for, right? Remember, we talk about, according to ANSI, a legit legal ANSI test, you have to be at least 10% of the loading of the CT. Well, using the ratios, 800 to 5, 400 to 5, 200 to 5, it's always to 5, right? If I have a tenth on one side, right, of a ratio like that, if I take 1/10 of that, I have to take 1/10 of the other side. So 1/10 of 800 is 80, 1/10 of 400 is 40, 1/10 of 200 is 20. But on that other side, 1/10 of 5 is always 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So no matter what size the CT is, I'm looking for 0.5 or more on the secondary for it to be a legit ANSI test at 10% of the rating of the CT. Okay, I'm always looking for that. So you can see right here, I've got my current, I've got 0.6 and 0.5. So I'm well over, so I'm doing good. So when I look at that and see those numbers, I'm thinking I should be fine to test it. So now we're going to look for when the big green ball lights up, we'll get a start test will pop up here, and it'll give you even a tone. You see now start test is popped up because I've got a good pulse. So now I can go ahead and start the test. And remember, there's always a difference between, if you do an integrated site test, it's always going to show you the vectors. If you did an individual and shows either just a meter test or a instrument transformer test, it doesn't. So in that case, you'll need to hit that hot button over there and take a look at the vectors so you can get a look at them. But on the integrated site test, it'll always show you the vectors before you get started. So here's what we're doing is, this is a customer load test. So what it does is it counts
the pulses using this pickup up here.
Okay, so we'll talk about a couple of quick things here. Remember that I always talk about you want to do comparisons and check out that primary versus secondary current. Okay, we didn't do it on this site, and here's what I'll tell you a couple things about it. One is, remember, if you're going to do this with overhead CTs, you have to have the high volt probe on that face to be able to see the primary, right? Because that's what I'm using to look at the primary. So if I don't have that, high volt probe up there on one of the phases, I can't see the primary current. So I can't do a comparison between primary and secondary current, okay? But if I want to look at, earlier I could see the secondary current, right? But I want to look at what the primary current is because I can read the secondary down there at the duct bills. But if I want to look at the primary, I've got to be on that primary current up there, okay? So if we had done that, if we wanted to toggle and look at it, then you would have put it up on A phase, and then I would have hit that pre-test like we talk about all the time. I'd have hit those the hot buttons down the side, and one of them is a vector button. I'd have hit that vector button, and when it came up, we've done it a bunch of times, now I have options in it. And F4 is toggling between primary and secondary current. Okay, and I can do that then because I'm looking at my primary current up there. So I can do that and I can toggle between the two. Okay, but if I don't have any primary sensor up there and I don't have 3 flex rings around there, if I'm using a high volt probe and I'm not on it up there, I can't do that pre-test look. It's a lot easier with the flexes because I put the 3 flexes on. Now I'm looking at all 3 primary phases, right? So then I can take a look at them and check them all. Okay.
On my COM port or my hog nose right here, so it's going to count the pulses, and then down here it counts the pulses 1, 2, 3. Then we measure voltage times current times power factor, and we come up with the watts. And off of the K sub T off of the meter, it tells us how many watts per pulse it should be. So then the machine calculates, well, actually, we counted 3 watts, but off of what we actually measured, which is the expected, when we measured it, it should have actually been 2.9979 pulses. So because of that, we do a comparison between the two and we get 100.071 for a % registration. That is an actual live using the CTs with the load from the CTs, not a phantom load, not a load box. This is a customer load test, right? So we're using the load here at the site. So that's telling us that the difference between the, if you're below 100%, you're just losing a tiny bit. Remember, we want to keep it tiny, but we're either losing a little bit, or if it's over 100, then you're actually, the customer's paying just a tiny bit more. 100's perfect, but you're never going to be there. You're going to be either a little under or a little over. We want to keep that number as minimal as possible, and that number, that 0.07 off of the 100, is well within what we would want, because the meter is only rated for 0.2%. So anything less than that should be good, because it's less than even the accuracy of the meter. So with a meter, these electronic meters being 0.2, anything within 99.8 and 100.2 is definitely good, okay? So now, let's look up top and see what Jonathan's done with our high volt probe. So you can see he needed to get around the conductors on the one phase there, and the key to this is, and you got a good stick man like this, he doesn't get anything else in there besides just the conductors going through that CT, right? You just want the ones going through the CT. So he hasn't picked up any extra wires up there. You can see where he's just around the conductors we need to be measuring right there. So once you get them on, and notice another key here is he's got it as far into that fork as he can, because that means it's within the sweet spot. There's actually a mark there, kind of a line of demarcation, that you want to be below that on those forks. And if you're inside of that, that's the high.
And here are those marks we're talking about. If you've used any of the high volt probes, you can see them. These marks right here and here, imagine a line across there. They want you to be inside of here, right? So a good, just a good field practice is to just always bottom it out as much as you can. If you get it down here in the bottom of it, you know you'll always be below these lines and within this area right here.
Highest accuracy that you can get on those. It's similar to being dead center on a flex ring, okay? So he's as tight as he can get. So like you've heard us say before, when you're going up and you just got the horseshoe like this, you want to bottom it out on the conductor. You've seen he's done the same thing coming at an angle right here. He's bottomed it out. So now I know I'm below that line on that horseshoe or that high volt probe, okay? So what's it looking like?
Haven't started yet.
All right. So let's get over here and hit the button. Once again, as we said before, it's going to show you the diagram again. It always does before both the meter test and before it tests the CTs. So it's saying you need to be on each one of them, and right now he's up there, so we're going to go ahead. He's on the 1 phase with the high volt probe, which is perfect. So I'm going to hit start test. So now we're going to test A and B phases, and as always, when you're only using one probe, either one flex or one high volt probe, it says move the probe to phase A and hit F6, our most popular button on the machine as always. So we hit F6. We get a pass, so we have a green pass on here, which means it has passed both the ratio test, and it's also, we don't have any problems from a phase angle error. So it's saying right here we got 1.39% on a ratio error, which is great. That's well within what we're looking for, and nothing's happened crazy on our phase angle error. We haven't picked up, because he did really well on the positioning of his high volt probe. Sometimes if I got multiple phases here and I'm trying to cram it in between there, I will pick up off of another phase, because these things don't have insulation around. They're reading all the way around, right? So that's where sometimes you can get a phase angle error. You can say, well, I'm looking good on my ratio. Why do I have phase angle error? That's why sometimes you have to tilt, right, that high volt probe up there to get between, so you're not touching other phases, because it'll pick something else up and that could cause you a problem. So when you do it the right way, you can see we got a great test on the first one. So now we're going to go ahead and hit the button again. We're going to hit.
Okay, so what did we learn from that first test? If you remember back, when I pointed that out on the CTs, they were dual rated CTs, right? They were rated 200 or 400 amp. So now I know that they're set for 200 amp. I don't know if you've ever been out there and seen this. I've been out there, though, where one of them wasn't the same as the other two. So when we ran the test, it passed, but it passed at 400. So if you don't put the actual size of the CTs in, the test that the machines do is they're just looking for the ratio falling within a parameter, and they're saying that's a pass. Now, if you put it in there and entered that site information, said there are 200 to 5 CTs on this site, if you measured it and it came out to be a 400 to 5, it would give you fail, because it's supposed to be a 200 to 5. But what if I didn't do that? What if I didn't load in the CTs? The machine will start testing without it, because it's going to pick up a ratio. Remember, it measures a ratio, and it comes up with a ratio, and it says, I got 202.58, right? So what does that mean? Those must be 200s. That's the measured ratio. That's the nameplate ratio. Okay, so it determines off of what you measured what the nameplate should be. But if I had a 400 in here, if someone had accidentally wired up B phase here for 400, and I didn't tell it pre-test or anything, tell it what size the CTs were, it's just looking for pass or fail. If the ratio fell in fine, it'd give you a pass too. And if you didn't notice, you wouldn't even notice you've got one of them that's not wired correctly. And again, whenever that happens, we lose money, right? So
F6 again. So we got a fail on this, and what is the fail? We're good on our ratio, but like we talked about a second ago, it's on our phase angle error, okay? So we may need to just reposition a little bit up there, and maybe we're touching something and we're off a little bit, but we're just getting phase angle error on that. But let's look at another thing right here. Look down and see, never mind. You got the Rolodex in your head, right? So you.
Okay, so here we go. We mentioned it earlier, right? That 10%, we're looking for at least 0.5 for it to be a legit ANSI test. And when you look here, we had 0.6 when we tested A phase. We got ready to test B phase, and now we're down to 0.173. Earlier, it was 0.5 something. I pointed that out, right? So now, evidently, something was on, shut off. So now I've dropped down to 0.173. When you start getting down there really, really low, it's just rolling the dice, to be honest. I mean, sometimes you'll get a test on one, there's no way you see how low it is. And then sometimes, you think they should test and they don't test. But I can tell you, when you get below that 0.5 number, you're rolling the dice, okay? And it'll give you error messages. In this case, we followed our red fail, and it was saying a phase angle error, okay? It was giving us a phase angle error. But we're going to look again, if it's too light a load, the machine doesn't like it. Remember, it starts giving you one error after another after another. low secondary current input, polarity reversal, cross phasing. Anytime you start seeing error after error, and it's that danger Will Robinson thing, right? So you just look on the machine and always immediately look for that dadgum, that secondary current, see how low it is. All right, if you didn't pre-check it. Okay.
Look right here, and you look how low I have 0.173 secondary amps right here. Okay, that's going to make it tough to test. Okay, when your load is that low, that is where you have a tough time testing. So you always want to confirm if you get something like that is look at some of those other numbers right there, and that's one of the keys to it is we know if you don't have enough load on there, that's when you maybe do a load boost test or you do something else. All right, so I'm going to try it one more time just for grins and giggles, but seeing that low a load on there, that doesn't give me a good feeling we're going to be able to test it. So the machine's got a gold box around here. I can move it up and retest A phase or go down and retest B phase. I want to retest just B phase, so I'm going to hit right here, retest, and it'll just retest this one instead of retesting them all. If I hit retest all, it would retest both of them. I don't need to, I got to pass here. So we'll give it one more shot. Maybe something will come on or something will give me a little bit more load, so I'm going to try it again and hit retest. So move it to B, which we have, and hit F6, our favorite button. And maybe this is where you hope something comes on and gives it a little bit more load. No, exactly what we just said. Now the machine's even telling me low secondary input. So I just don't have enough going on up there. I don't have enough load for me to be able to test this properly, all right? And then you'll see again, if I hit continue here, that's going to show itself out again when we look at the numbers. Well, I'll be doggone. And it's trying to make a liar out of me. It gave me a pass. So after it said low secondary input. So there must have been a change in the load. And if I look over here, actually this.
So, of course, it's going to make a liar out of me. And I will say, this is the second lowest I think I've seen. I've seen one at 0.06 test and say pass. But here's something that I just want to point out. If you're out in the field and it's giving you errors and it's not saying it's going to pass, and it's giving you a low secondary current input, cross phase, it's doing all that stuff, and you get a big fail up here, right? Because it doesn't like what it's seeing. You can do a quick field reference to see if you're close or not, okay? Here's where you need to keep in mind what your building multipliers are. Remember, we tested it out, and it says 200 to 5s. So if they're 200 to 5s, that would mean the multiplier is 40. So what I could do in this case, right, is I can take 3.4, pull out my handy dandy phone here, and I'm going to go 3.4 divided by 40 equals 0.085. See, so when I'm in the field and it just gives me a fail, and it's just saying a fail and it's not passing. If I don't have enough there, if I got a tiny bit of load, I can actually just do some quick math on my phone or calculator, and I can make sure it's pretty close. Like in that case, remember, I took my primary current. If you're going from primary to secondary, you're going down, right? So I'm going to get a smaller number. I'm going to divide. To get a bigger number, I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to take 3.4. I'm going to divide by that 40, that multiplier, and I'm going to get 0.085. If I just saw the 0.085, I would multiply by the 40 and get up here to 3.4. Okay? And I should have stopped it earlier on the other one because it came out the same way. I believe it was like around 6 primary, wasn't it? 6 something primary. And let's just try that. 6 divided by 40 equals 0.15. And I believe the one on last one was 0.17. So it was 6 point something primary amps. And if I divided them by 40 a minute ago and I got that fail, I could divide by the 40, and it was like 1.71 versus 1.73 off of the math. So you at least know you're close. You'd be able to see if you were way off. And in these really highly corrosive environments or problems where you don't have any load, so it's tough to do the CT test. I mean, if you just keep in mind those billing multipliers, you can do some quick math and see if you're close. So it would tell you if there's a real issue there, okay, before you just walked away or didn't test it. If you didn't have the equipment to do that load boost test we're talking about, okay, and there's just not enough there. You got the sewer lift station, all of a sudden everything shuts off. You got nothing there, okay. But you can at least measure that primary versus secondary amps That's where I think it's so important too, and I'm going to roll this on into it, looking pre-test. So if I looked at pre-test and I saw, man, or even if I tried the test and you couldn't get the test to run, I can back out and come back to that point where I'm pre-test, back out on the machine, and now pre-test, I can just toggle remember on F4 and I can look at primary current versus secondary current, and then I can do the math. So if the machine said, no, I'm not going to test this site, I can still do the math and see if I'm close.
It's one of those times where you just consider yourself lucky and blessed and go on. That load is very, very light, and you would think normally you wouldn't get a test out of this. But this is just being one of those days where God's smiling on you and you get a good test.
Well, one thing I did do is I turned the fork a little bit.
Did you turn the fork a little bit?
Yeah, it was sitting up there about like that.
Ah, you got it more perpendicular to it?
So I turned it a little bit to change the angle coming through there to maybe see if it might bring that phase angle error down a little bit.
Okay, but that is unusual to have that light a load and be able to still test it. So this is one of those you just be thankful and go on. So, but to what he's saying, it's similar to when we talk about using flexes and getting them. If I have a conductor running this way and I've got a flex around it, I don't want the flex like this or hanging on it that way. I try and get either this high volt probe or the flexes. You want it to be perpendicular to the conductor as much as possible. You get better tests off that, okay? But like I said, this is one of them where typically you don't get, consistently rather I should say, consistently you're not going to get good tests here, but this is just one of those where you say, thank you Lord, and go on. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit done. So I got the good pass on it. Great, and if you didn't have, remember, if I don't have enough of a load on there, that's when you can use a piece of equipment to load boost or run or drive some current through the CTs to be able to test them. And we're actually going to do that at the next site we're going to. So if you run into that where you don't have enough load to be able to test them, there is equipment out there that you can use it to actually drive some current through that CT and get you to that point, right? Because typically what ANSI says is we want to be at 10% of the rating of that CT to be able to test it, okay? So we can do that using equipment to boost the current going through there, all right?
So some of the tips we learned right there, just on that high volt probe, right? You want to have it as perpendicular to the conductor as possible. You saw that we didn't pass the test the first time, then he moves the position of that high volt probe. Next thing you know, we get a pass, right? So you want it to be perpendicular to it as much as possible, and you want to have it past those lines, which tells you you're deep enough in there so you're in the more accurate position inside that horseshoe. So you want to be deep down in there at the bottom of the horseshoe, and you want to try and be as perpendicular to the conductor as possible. And that helps you on the phase angle. You just saw it in practice right there when he moved that high volt probe and got it more perpendicular. Then we got a pass test on there. So that is definitely something to keep in mind when you're using those high volt probes, all right? So remember, this is going to be the second one of these I did today. So this will be week after next that we'll be showing this one. So send us in some choices you want for February 15th. Send them into JP. He's going to put a list out of the remaining ones we have left, and you guys pick one out, and we're going to go off of your vote, okay? Most importantly, be careful out there, all right? God bless y'all. Thanks.